Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here back in with another video, and this is going to be episode 3 of the LEGO Star Wars MOC Showcase. This is a series I've created to highlight some of the best MOCs I've come across on the internet. If you find any of the MOCs in this video impressive, all I ask is that you go to the links I've included in the description and support the builder by giving them a like, comment, or even a follow. The first MOC we're going to look at is actually a series of vignettes of the Death Star 2 trench run with the Millennium Falcon. One of the first things I noticed about this MOC is just the red scaffolding that is kind of protruding out of that main hole that they go into to enter the core of the Death Star. This is one of those builds where you really have to look closely to figure out exactly how the builder has implemented the technique and figure out also just what parts they're using. It took me a while to really just kind of like break this thing apart in my mind and figure out what parts are being used here, and I really do appreciate the usage of those like red crowbar pieces as well as the red actuator pieces as well. I think those all combined together to make really nice scaffolding. This actually looks like a pretty accurate MOC to what we see on screen. The other nice thing about just the general surface of the Death Star 2 is that it's snot. I feel like you don't typically see people go for a snot effect for the Death Star surface, but I certainly think it was achieved here, and it looks quite nice. I can always appreciate some snot work. And then the last thing I noticed about this first picture is the fact that this is what you'd call quote unquote a free form MOC. I wasn't really familiar with this until actually quite recently someone mentioned it to me. Like, obviously I've seen MOCs like this before, I just didn't know that the specific technique is was called something. But yeah, the fact that it's not on a base plate, the fact that the edges of the MOC just kind of venture off onto their own is called a freeform MOC. And the more I see MOCs like these, the more I understand the appeal of it. The cool thing about it for me is I feel like your imagination kind of fills out where this MOC will go on the edges of it, whereas the MOC with a base plate has a very confined area. You know exactly where it begins and ends, so it kind of limits your imagination in that regard. So I think that that aspect of this MOC does work in its favor. Furthermore, I did want to mention that mini scale Millennium Falcon up top. It's very seldom that you see new versions of these being built because so many people have built them. So for him to have a creative and original version of a mini scale Falcon that actually looks quite good is definitely a plus. Moving on to the next picture, I just think that this thing sets such an awesome scene. I mean, look at it. I would want a poster with this thing, and that's saying a lot considering this is a mini MOC. Like, most of the time I would want a poster of like minifig scale things. You can like edit the picture and do whatever you want with it, but even with this being a mini scaled MOC, I think it still looks great. The builds of the X-Wings in the background, we don't have the best view of them, but I actually think they look quite nice from what we can see. Making mini scale X-Wings is no easy feat, especially with just the shaping of the wings in general and the fact that there are 4 of them, but it looks like he did quite a good job on those, and just the scene altogether looks so nice. I also can appreciate the little touches of like lighting effects, for example, on the front of the Millennium Falcon. I think that when people can combine really nice looking Lego shots with really nice editing, I think that actually goes a long way. And moving to the final picture, the first thing I noticed about this one is obviously the big brick built explosions. Lego explosions are not easy to make. It's something that's really difficult to conceptualize because, I mean, when we think about explosions in our head, I think we have a good general understanding of it, but it's not obvious which Lego pieces will help you get what's in your head onto the actual build. So whenever people can accomplish these things in a way that looks really nice, I give them all the credit in the world because it's something that I struggle with all the time. But the other thing that sticks out to me about this explosion build is that it's not really constructed of very many fire pieces. Like, I can see a few of like the really big fire pieces poking out from it, but for the most part it's made using a bunch of other pieces in like trans red and trans orange, whether it be those big whip antennas or it looks like he has some like trans orange boulder pieces in the middle as well. And I don't know, I think those just, it works. Like, I think a lot of people can maybe go overboard with using fire pieces for something like this. The Lego fire pieces are just so stylized, it's honestly hard to get them looking in a natural way when using a bunch of them. So you really have to put quite a bit of effort into that, but this guy I think implements this thing very well. And just looking at this, the first thing that pops into my mind is how cool would it be to have something like this on your wall as like a light. I mean, I'm not sure how like the pieces on the actual explosion build are held in. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they're probably not all secured perfectly. It probably relies on you having this MOC sitting on the table, but if there is a way to recreate something even similar to this and put on your wall and have like a Millennium Falcon jutting out of the explosion of the exhaust port of the Death Star 2, and have the Millennium Falcon jutting out of the explosion in the Death Star too. I think that would look pretty awesome. So great job, DID&THEBRICKS. I really do like this mini mock. Next up, we have a Yavin build by Krisaps Yavin, and I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that last name, but if you know how to pronounce it, definitely let me know in the comment section. But any build that has a lot of like trees and bushes and various Lego foliage is always going to catch my attention. But the thing that I really appreciate about this build are the various bits of like cargo crates and machinery decorated throughout the mod. Those are things that are pretty small details, but I mean, it's difficult to come out with unique versions of these that look nice and are fairly differentiated from each other. And I think he does a marvelous job in the various areas of this mock and having those builds in there. And I think he does quite a good job on those builds. These small builds concern what is otherwise just a really creative way to display your Lego Star Wars sets into a really lively looking mock. Just look at the various colors he uses in these little fuel canisters, I presume, or even just this technology right here by the Blue Squadron guys. All those are things that we'd really take for granted in a build like this, but there's clearly a lot of thought put into those builds, and I think the details come together to make something that does just look like a really nice mock. If I ever were to be building a hangar or something like this, I would definitely come back to this picture for some inspiration in building a lot of those little tidbits. Next up, we have an Imperial mining outpost on Orto, Plutonia by Gabe F. If you guys recall, Orto Plutonia is the snow planet they visit in the Clone Wars, where they had the snow clones as well as the Tals species that they kind of have to learn to work with. So it was interesting seeing a take on that, but more in the Imperial era of things. And there are just so many different things to talk about in this one picture of this relatively small mock. So first thing that really sticks out to me is just the general design of the snow. The usage of those curved slopes on the bottom makes it look really smooth. I don't know, I like curved slopes for snow as well as just general tiles for snow. I think those actually look quite nice. The snow on the top of the building actually looks really good, and the fact that he used those wedge plates at the very edges of it really does convey the idea that like the snow has kind of been falling off of the edges. And I don't know, it's something that it's kind of difficult to explain, but like if you see snow on a roof, like you'll realize this actually looks exactly the way it should. So kudos to him on that. The other thing I really like is just the design of the cargo crates. Like it's not like they're anything super special or difficult to build, but the fact that he made them yellow actually goes a long way. And that's the thing about like cargo crates and little details like this in Star Wars mocks. Star Wars mocks have a way of being relatively monochromatic, especially when it's something like the Empire, because it's mostly dark grays and light grays and some blacks maybe thrown in there. And then in this, of course, he has the white with the snow. But making those yellow does a really good job of just adding color to an otherwise monochromatic mock or concept of a mock. So that was actually a really good decision there. If you look at the side of the building, you'll see some pretty intense snot work to get some of the lettering done in there, and that's actually really nice. It looks like most of it is faded, so it's kind of difficult to make out what it would say, but it looks nice. It looks like a really good and difficult to implement technique. He also put some cheese slopes in there sideways, so just another good usage of snot technique there. Right below that, you also see that it looks like he's using those like 2x2 crates to get some subtle detailing in the walls, and that's actually something I never considered, so I might have to do that down the line just to get some little small details into what might otherwise be a flat wall. I had someone ask me, I don't know if it was one of your questions answered, but basically, you know, how can you make a Lego wall look more detailed? And it's just little things like this that can go a long way, and I'm turning an otherwise flat wall into something that looks, you know, pretty cool and pretty detailed. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this picture is actually that ventilation system on the top of the building there. It looks like it's built mostly snot, and I mean, you'll notice that throughout a lot of this guy's mocks. There's so many good, unique snot techniques, and that ventilation system up top is no different. It actually looks really nice. Ventilation systems are something that I feel when I design them, I really take just the most simple approach, but this is a really good, unique way to build that, so I'm actually thoroughly impressed with that technique there. Moving on to the next picture, it's really just a close-up of the two minifigures that are walking outside. First thing that pops out to me is the usage of those dual molded boots. That's not really something that, I don't know, is like a good technique with a mock or anything, but I'm like, when is that going to become the standard for Star Wars figures is my question. Like, I appreciate when anyone does it, but like, Lego just needs to start giving us our Imperial officer figures those legs right out of the box. The other thing that does stick out to me as a good mod technique, however, is that usage of the white rubber band band as a small subtle scarf. That's actually a really good idea. I've never seen that used before, so I will put that in my repertoire of Lego Star Wars mock techniques. I'll definitely have to use that at some point. On the next picture, it's just a close-up of that snowspeeder, and I can always appreciate when people do custom builds of these things. Lego's versions always tend to be just a little bit too big, so I can appreciate this build right here, and it actually looks really good. The last picture is a look at the interior of the base, and you can see that there's nothing super crazy going on here, but there are a few small things that I noticed that actually make a big difference in this mock. The first is the usage of those 1x2 Technic bricks with 2 holes in the walls just to create some details. And like I said, earlier, if you want to include various details on your walls, these are the things that you can do to include it. And those Technic bricks actually look really nice. I think it can probably be used like some sort of ventilation system. I don't know, there might be some Jedis in the ventilation shaft, who knows, but I like that technique a lot. Actually, I've never seen that used that way. The other thing that sticks out to me is the usage of the dome of that droid from the Old Republic set. Uses a console that actually looks really good. That is something that I would even consider in one of my mocks down the line. The one last thing I wanted to mention is the usage of the spring-loaded missile launchers as the door. You can see it creates that nice little dark gray, light gray detail in there. And I've seen the spring-loaded missile launchers used as like a pathway in the ground, which I thought would just look really awesome. And using them for a door clearly can give you just as cool as an effect. So this is something you guys can use to make even something as simple as a door look nice and detailed. And finally, we're going to take a look at this Kessel mock by Vauban. This guy actually did the Canto Bite mock that I showed off in the first ever episode of the mock showcase series. And just looking through this guy's mocks on his Flickr, you can definitely expect to see a lot more of his work in this series. He just builds so many mocks and all of them are freaking awesome. So if we look at this first picture, honestly, I couldn't really find many great pictures of this mock, but I didn't want that to take away from me showing this off in this video series, so just try to bear with me on that. We actually go to the next picture, we can see a little close-up of the custom Kessel Run Falcon that he did. It looks like it's mostly the UCS version, obviously color swapped, and then the front end is just completely redone. You can see he uses a snot technique on those mandibles on the front, which actually looks pretty nice. It looks pretty smooth and I guess consistent with what you would expect for the newer Kessel Run Falcon to look like. But also the lines on that front portion make it apparent that the escape pod is probably detachable, which is actually pretty cool. I haven't really seen Kessel Run Falcon done at this scale with that actual function. So if that's the case, I would love to see maybe an in-depth look at this Kessel Run Falcon mock, because even if there's an interior in there, that would actually make it even cooler. But from just looking at it right now, it does look like you can eject that escape pod. The next picture is a good look at Kessel Site and his Kessel guards walking towards the Falcon. You can also see he has included a Stitch minifigure once more. I guess this guy really does like his Stitch minifigure, so he tries to put them in as many mocks as he can with the various aliens that we see working on Kessel. I think those acid pools actually look really cool. That trans bright green tile, I don't know, just makes it pop so much. It looks just disgusting. Like you wouldn't want to get anywhere near that thing, which is really the look that you'd want to go for with something like an acid pool. The other nice thing about this picture is it gives you a good look at those pieces of machinery that are, I don't know how exactly they interact with the acid pools. Maybe they maintain it to make them less toxic or something. I don't know, but this machinery itself actually looks quite nice. Anytime we can use those quarter cylinders on Star Wars mocks, I'm down for it, because that's such a useful piece. And I don't know, just the machinery looks really, really cool, so I like that a lot. This next photo is just a really good look at the exterior of the mine section, and I mean, just from looking at this without really knowing too much about the mock, I think you just really have to appreciate the various colors that he put into the rock work. I mean, I can see at least like 4 or 5 different colors. There's just tan, dark tan, brown, sand green, dark orange, even maybe a little bit of that nougat color in there. And I think they all combine to make a really nice detailed rock work on the outside of this mock. So that actually looks really, really nice. The other thing that I like about this is the design of the various towers. There's the one at the top left corner that I think actually looks really cool. The use of those brown tube parts I think adds quite a lot to it, makes it maybe look less monochromatic with just a dark gray. So the brown there does a lot for the mock. But then on the right side inside the landing platform, I don't really recall seeing this in the film. I'm not going to say that it's not there because I very well could have just missed it, but it is a very cool detail for the MOC. It looks like a pretty cool, I don't know, like support beam structure right below it. Those angles look pretty interesting. So, and outside of those things, I also really do like just the various pipe work that is really strung along the outside of those rock pieces. I think that pipes are something that's really difficult to get to look natural in a MOC, so when you can achieve that, that is definitely a great thing. This next picture gives us a better look at that landing platform, and it really does make me appreciate just kind of how like the natural elements of this MOC mix with the man-made elements. Like obviously all the rock work and stuff is like a natural part of Kessel, but I don't know, I just like how it all fits in with like the man-made landing platform or even the big tower at the top. I mean, it's one of the cool things that we get to see with Star Wars, how they use their technology and really infuse it with a lot of the landscape. It's a pretty cool looking contrast in my opinion. The next picture is a look at the interior of the Kessel mines, and then once again it's the same thing as the exterior. Just look at how beautiful this rock work is. I often will judge a person's rock work by the variety of different parts that they can use in it. Like it's really easy to just use like a couple of slopes, but it takes a lot of thought to really get in there and use many different types of slopes as well as many different types of colors, and this guy just really knocks it out of the park with all this rock work in here. So I mean, just looking at this thing, it's so aesthetically pleasing. The one thing I do wish he did was somehow maybe build this MOC to be a little bit more enclosed. That way you could get more shadows, have it be a little bit more dim, and then maybe have lights inside the MOC illuminated to give you just a little bit more of a Kessel aura inside of these like caves. Like the way it's built now, it looks a little bit too open, and I can understand why he'd build it this way, really just to make it easy for people to see it. But it would be cool to see, you know, all this beautiful rock work in a more dim setting, and just like, I don't know, really take you back to the caves on Kessel. The next picture is once again a closer look at the just various rock work and pipe pieces. Like I can just look at this stuff all day long. It's so pleasing to the eye. If we move along, we can see he also created the droid control room, which is really funny to look at because there's so many wonky looking droids in this thing. I'm not sure how many of these are ones that he, you know, got directly from the film or that he just used his imagination for, but they look good. It combines to really set the scene. Like anyone who looks at this would know exactly what this is supposed to be. I think that the details on the walls actually look really nice. The angles on the corners there look really cool, and those ingot pieces just work well for really any type of greebling or details, so great usage of those there. It also looks like he included a mini kit, which makes me happy to see that he is also a man of culture. And then finally, I really wanted to talk about these consoles in the middle of the room. Consoles are something that like you really have to put a bit of an effort into to make them look correct and consistent. Like of course there are a lot of different like printed tiles and pieces you can use, but if you don't stick with a general slate of colors, just mixing in a bunch of pieces of various colors with print on them just doesn't look good when all combined together. So it's nice to see that, you know, the bottom slopes that are all black base colors with print on them, and then right above that he has those tiles, the black tiles with the print on it, and then above that he's using all dark gray tiles with print on them. So if you want to make sure that your consoles look consistent, I think that's a good rule of thumb. And then finally we have the coaxium vault. This room looks so freaking cool. The thing that really sticks out to me is just the patterns on the floor with those sandwich tiles. That's such a great part that LEGO released, and I'm just always seeing people come up with creative ways to implement those into MOCs. The slanted walls also look really cool, and I mean there's just so many details in those as well, so I can appreciate that. But then the thing that really sticks out to me is just the wires that are coming from the actual vault. Like I said, getting your wires to look nice and natural is not an easy thing to do, and it just looks so fantastic here. I really do love this room. I think my big takeaway from this MOC is that I'm just really appreciative that we have these new Star Wars films coming out with new subject matter for us to build MOCs from. Like Kessel was a pretty big part of the Solo film, so that really gives us a lot of opportunity to show our interpretations of it. And the fact that we're getting new, unique looking locations to build MOCs on, I think adds a lot to our community. So there's one good thing about the Disney regime and them making films is that we just have so many more things to build MOCs of, which is certainly a great thing for this community. And that's going to finish up the video for this week, guys. I hope that you enjoyed looking at these mocks as much as I did. These guys built some beautiful creations, and if you agree with me, make sure you go to the links I included in the description and support these builders by dropping them a like, follow, or even a comment. Make sure you give them the credit that they deserve. They did an awesome job on these mocks. I'll see you guys again next week.